Hello, welcome to Refuah Nefesh Live Conversations. My name is Dr. Ariel Mintz. I am the host of Live Conversations with Refuah Nefesh, and I'm also the executive director. Tonight's live conversation is sponsored by Ariel Moskowitz in honor of his bar mitzvah. We wish him a mazel tov, and we thank him for sponsoring this live conversation. Tonight, we're privileged to have Dr. Steve Glicksman join us, and he will be on very shortly. Dr. Glicksman is a licensed developmental psychologist at McCord Disability Services. He's also an adjunct professor at Yeshiva College and the Faircroft Graduate School of Yeshiva University. He's a consultant psychologist in the School for Children with Hidden Intelligence in Lakewood, New Jersey. He has a private practice in Teaneck, New Jersey, and he has presented on a variety of topics at numerous professional conferences, and his research has been published in both national and international scientific journals. If anyone has questions throughout the live conversation, you can post them on Facebook, or if you'd like to remain anonymous, you could send them to info@refuahhanefesh.org, and we will ask them anonymously to Dr. Glicksman. Additionally, if you have questions after the live conversation, you can send it to that same email address, and we will be happy to pass them on to Dr. Glicksman. If anyone would like to sponsor a live conversation in the future, please reach out to info@refuahhanefesh.org, and we could discuss details. And that we do have another live conversation coming up in 1 month. Be sure to tune in on that one. That will be an excellent live conversation. We will be hearing from someone who has lived with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and she will share her journey with us and kind of the ups and downs through it and what she has learned. That conversation will be February 17th, just a little over a month from now. So mark your calendars and be sure to tune in. Well, welcome. So the title of your conversation is Dealing with Stress. I think it would probably be a fair point to start with just defining our terms. What is stress?
If you want to know the dictionary definition of stress, all right, which is, again, my go-to source for understanding everything in the world is the American Heritage Dictionary. So the dictionary definition of stress. So per the American Heritage Dictionary, is a mentally or emotionally disruptive or upsetting condition occurring in response to adverse external influences and capable of affecting physical health. And when you think about every sort of part of that definition, right? It's an emotionally or mentally upsetting condition that occurs in response, which means something sets it off. It's in response to an adverse external influence, which means that it's something outside of us that is causing it. And it's capable of affecting physical health, which means we should take it seriously, stress. It's nothing to kind of be pushed aside. At the same time, if you want another definition of stress, another way of looking at stress is that stress is really a gift from God. It's part of our development as a species. It's part of our evolution, however you want to word it. It's the way our bodies respond when we're in danger. So if you think about the physiological manifestations of stress, and you consider that our pupils dilate, you consider that our heart starts beating fast, we turn pale, and you think back to our ancestors in dangerous situations, right? People getting chased by bears. So then stress is what is the body setting off that response for fight or flight. Either we're going to fight the bear, which is probably not such a great idea, or we're going to run from the bear. But those physiological responses helped ensure our safety. So when you think about your heart beating faster, why does that happen when we're under stress? It's so that the oxygen can rush to our muscles so that we can act. Our pupils dilate, in case the lighting isn't so good. The reason we turn pale sometimes is because the blood is rushing away from our skin. So if we get scratched by the bear, we're not going to bleed so much. Stress is our way of surviving.
So
nowadays, right? We're not necessarily being chased by bears.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, our bodies respond as if we're under attack. Our bodies respond sometimes as if we're in danger.
Well, so
And
I assume we're
once
going
you,
into kind of maybe the negatives, but nowadays that we're not being attacked by bears, are there positives to stress, or is it just a evolutionary holdover that's only going to cause us problems?
so when you consider, and understand where stress comes from, and you understand why those physiological manifestations occur, then you can look around and say, you know what? I recognize what this is. This is stress. This is my body responding to something outside of me that I need to address. But when you take a step back and recognize that we're not probably in danger anymore, things might be hard and things might be challenging. And that's the reason why our bodies are telling us we got to move, we got to act, we got to do something. But the fact that holdover from our history leads that response to acting as if we're being chased by a bear, right? It's causing our heart to beat fast. It's causing our muscles to get pumped. It's causing that fight or flight reaction when really to deal with stress now it's not a fight or flight conversation, not a fight or flight issue. Really, stress is our body's way of telling us that we need to move, we need to act on something, that something has to be addressed. And much the same way that, nutrition, right? If you don't use nutrition as an analogy, our body is pre-wired to crave salt and to crave fat, right? And to crave starch, right? Carbohydrates. And why is that? It's because in a completely natural environment, those cravings lead to very healthy lifestyles. Right? The reason our bodies crave fat is because fat is usually associated with protein, right? So we have to eat fatty foods. That's where the protein comes from. The reason we crave salt is because our bodies don't produce salt, and we need sodium in our bloodstream. We need sodium to live, so we crave salt. The reason we crave sweets is because in an ideal environment, sweet carbohydrates are sweet, starches are sweet. So in an ideal environment, that led us to eating the natural carbohydrates that we need. Now it happens that, a few thousand years go by, and, there's some very clever food scientist somewhere that decide that someone can make a lot of money, and recognizing that, we can probably just take starch and fry it in fat and add salt, and people will buy that because those are the foods that our body craves. Those are the flavors our body craves, and ergo we have the potato chip, which is not so healthy. So when you think about stressful situations, so you got to consider, is the situation that's causing me my stress, is it a grizzly bear situation or is it a potato chip situation? Is it like an actual situation where I'm in danger and need those physiological responses in order to act? Or is it like a potato chip situation that really, yes, this physiological reaction is there for me to act in, when necessary. Now I do need to act. Like I'm in a stressful situation, so I do need to act. Something is causing me to feel this way, but I'm not in danger. Like I'm not being chased by bears. It's a fake danger situation. It's concerning and it's real, and I would think, especially for the people, who are listening to this, the ones who stayed on, after the technological difficulties, which means they must really be interested in this. They're really going through stressful situations, but recognize that your body is reacting. Your body isn't discriminating between the grizzly bear chasing you and whatever is going on in your life. And when you think about how to deal with stress, just that first recognition that I'm not being chased. I've been through things before, that I've been in stress before and I've made it through. To take a deep breath, to relax your body, because your body is getting ready to fight or flight. And really, you just need to address. You just need to act. You don't need to fight and you don't need to run. You just need to address whatever happens the stress at this moment,
Dr.
and then you can deal with it better.
As you talk about this, I'm brought back to memories. About a decade ago, I was privileged to take several of your courses, and I actually remember you giving this example of the potato chips. And I remember you speaking also about the benefits of broccoli that they've discovered for little kids and brain development. But I also remember sitting in for your test, and you were a very kind teacher, but I remember the heart beating, and in some ways, I think that's our modern day fear chasing us. We're all afraid if we fail this test, life is over. Is that completely unhealthy, or is maybe it warranted to some degree? Because nowadays we do have academic stresses. We're not worried about being killed by a bear. We're worried about being able to succeed, to be able to continue to produce for our family and to get to the next level.
Right. And it's not to belittle those causes of stress. But when you think about times that you felt stress, like taking my exam, for example, right? When you felt your heart beating, right? And when you felt yourself sweating, right? You felt yourself getting warmer because the blood was rushing right away from your skin. And you felt that anxiousness, right? You felt that stress response. If you stopped for a minute and said, okay, I understand why I feel this way, right? Because my body is telling me that I need to act on something. But the fight or flight response is probably getting in the way of you doing well on the exam, right? That fight or flight response is probably getting in the way of you dealing with your kids who are driving you a little bit crazy, right? Or talking to the insurance company, or dealing with whatever issues we might have, serious issues, right, that we might have in our lives, those external factors that are causing us to feel this way. When you think about, let's take a doctor's appointment. When you compare a doctor's appointment that you were stressed about, right, that you were stressed about before you went, and you compare that with a doctor's appointment that you didn't feel stress over, and you ask yourself, well, what's the difference between those two cases? Chances are that it probably wasn't about necessarily the seriousness of the appointment or the content of the appointment or what was going to be said for it. Probably the main difference between a stressful doctor's appointment and a non-stressful one is the element of control. Like, you go for your physical and you know what's going to happen, and your physical is important, right? It's an important medical appointment, right? And you might even hear news that's very challenging or something you didn't expect. Like, it's a serious thing, your annual physical, but you don't get stressed necessarily before it because you know what an annual physical is like, right? You go, he checks you out, you see the doctor, they feel anything, they look at forms, they do stuff. Like, that's what happens at a doctor's appointment. When you go to get test results, right, and you're stressed about it, it's not because the results themselves are any more important than any other test you might like. The physical exam is also a test, right? It's that you don't know what's going to happen, right? If you think about road rage, right? You've never heard, right? Road rage is defined as stress caused by driving, but I don't think anybody's ever heard a story of somebody on an empty road with no other traffic ramming into a tree because of road rage, right? Road rage isn't stress caused by driving. Road rage is caused by stress. Road rage is stress caused by other people driving who are getting in the way of me being able to control my own commute, right? Like, I want to go fast. There's a car in front of me. I'm out of control. That's road rage. When I was stressed at the beginning of this talk, right, I know what the definition of stress is. And as much as I might get nervous before I speak to a group of people, right, nervousness isn't the same as stress, right? I was stressed because of the technology. I was out of my control. I couldn't do anything about it, right? That was what was causing stress. And if at that point, when my heart started beating fast and when I started getting sweaty, right, and when those things were happening, if I allowed myself to give in to those physiological manifestations, then we'd probably still be going back and forth and trying to figure it all out, right? Because I would barely be able to type. when I recognize that, the reason my body's reacting this way is because when I need to take on something, when I need to act on something, right? When those situations present themselves to me, so then my body goes back, right, to the way it was originally built, originally wired, fight or flight, right? You know, run away or fight the bear, right? That's what it was. But I didn't need to do that now. And once I recognized that that's where those physiological manifestations came from, then I was able to take a deep breath, right? And take a deep breath isn't just to, take a break. It's to slow down my heart, right? I was able to take a drink to cool off a little bit, water, not anything else, right? But take a drink. Sometimes you could take a drink to relax too. That's okay, but it's for another time, right? And clearly don't overdo it. I read the Kiddish Club blog, but the idea that when you think about stress, so many times what we really think, what's really causing the stress is not those, it's not the test, and it's not the doctor, and it's not the insurance, it's not those things. It's the control piece. When we feel that we don't have control over a situation, that leads to stress. And when we could be in a very, tense, problematic, important, situation. But if we feel that we're in control, that we have some sort of aspect of control over what's going on, you find the stress level goes down.
So you mentioned, being aware that we're not going to get eaten by a bear. Life isn't as stressful maybe as it was back in the day. We don't need to give into that stress response like we had to. What are some other techniques we could use to really take control of that situation again and not let stress overtake us and make us less successful?
So there's a few things that I'd say. There's a few, sort of tricks. And I'm a big fan of rules of thumb, just like little pithy things I could say to myself in times of stress to get me to the next moment. And some of these, rules might be helpful to people, and some of them might be less helpful. There's no order. There's no assent. You just have to sort of choose which one is good for you at any given moment. But one kind of saying that I like to have in my head in stressful situations is to recognize that yesterday was also once a tomorrow. And what I mean by that is that this is not the first time you ever felt stress. Like, you've been in situations before and you got through it. And if you look back on those situations, you might not even realize how you got through it. It's just that kind of life went on and life continued, and no emotion lasts forever. Tomorrow, right? That next thing, that next appointment, that next interview, that next interaction is sometimes stressful because it's an unknown. But when you stop and think that yesterday was also once an unknown, like yesterday was also something that I didn't know what to expect when it was a tomorrow, right? Before it happened. But it happened and you survived it. And I'll put it another way. For people who are in very stressful situations, and I deal with lots of people, lots of parents, lots of kids, I deal with lots of people who are really in, unfortunately, very stressful situations. But I'll often ask them, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if somebody told you that this was how your life was going to be right now, would you have said, yeah, I could handle that? Right? Would you have said 10 years ago, if somebody would describe the situation you're in now, do you think you'll be able to cope with these life circumstances? Most of the time, people say, no, I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it. So I don't know how you got to where you are now. Like, I don't know how anybody got to where they are today, but I know you got here. Like, I know that you've survived whatever occurred till now. I know you can survive whatever occurs after now too. As hard as it sometimes might be, I know whatever you've gone through, you've made it through. yesterday was also once a tomorrow. And now you can look back and say, I made it through that. I can make it through the next one too.
I recall personally, taking pre-med, very stressful time. And I remember people that were a little bit ahead of us would always advise us, in 10 years, you're not even going to remember that test. It's not really going to make that much of a difference in your life. And it's so true looking back. But it also, I remember it's so hard to really appreciate that in the moment when that is that big obstacle in front of you.
Right. And that's why it's good to talk to people. And that's why it's good to, to have talks like this where you talk about what stress is, because it's very hard in the moment unless you can recognize what the moment is, right? It's really hard in the moment when you're in it. But when you can take a step back and say, right, stress, I know what stress is. This is what stress is. Like, yeah, this is what I'm feeling. And the reason that I'm feeling this way is because that's how my body is wired. And the reason that I'm physically feeling this way is because that's the way my body is wired. But maybe that physiological response is an overreaction to what's going on now. The reason I'm emotionally feeling this way is because I don't know what to expect next, right? I'm lacking that control. But okay, like I that's true. But it's also true that a week ago, I didn't know what to expect half a week ago, right? Yesterday, I didn't know what to expect today, and I made it through. And that sometimes is something that people can. It doesn't make the situation necessarily any easier. You still have to address it, but it makes the dealing with the situation, the coping with the situation.
Sure. So if I could sum it up in one word, I think would be perspective. I think what you're saying is that if you have perspective about why we have stress and where things are going to turn out in the future, it will help us relax a little bit and not be as stressed. Is that accurate?
I get it. I need to act, and now I'm going to go do it, right? And I'm not being chased by a bear. I'm just calling the insurance company, or I'm just dealing with a loss, right? You have a loss that's stressful. You have a sick parent. You're going through a mental illness. You have a child with a disability. There's lots of reasons why we need to act on things, right? And those things often cause us stress. But when you stop and say, okay, stress is telling me I need to act on it, but now let me take a deep breath, right? Let me recognize that even in the darkest of moments, I've had dark moments before, and I've made it through. I've come through them. That means that I have a strength, right? I have abilities. And once I recognize that in myself, I don't have to let those physiological stress reactions overtake me. Sure. And I can tackle what's going to happen next.
Okay. Moving on a little bit. So when does it change from a normal physiological stress reaction into an anxiety disorder that someone should seek treatment for?
So the standard psychology rule of thumb is if you find that stress is impacting your life, right, to an extent that you're unable to function, so then it might need to be addressed. There also are people in the world, right, because who, for whatever reason, have a chemical imbalance that leads that stress response to occur by itself, right? I mean, typically, when we say stress response, what does that mean? It means that there's outside influences that are, pressing different buttons and sending off different neurotransmitters in the brain to cause certain physiological reactions. Someone might have a condition in which those neurotransmitters are being turned on by themselves for whatever reason. So then you might need to look into how to address that, with a professional. But oftentimes, if you recognize stress and you don't allow it to overtake you, and to cause you the inability to act. So then you can control those reactions. You can use them for your benefit. we say that stress got a bad rap because, people talk about stress causing heart attacks, stress causing different medical illnesses, and all of these things. It's interesting to note. There was a lot of historical research that came out a couple of years ago, and it made the papers a lot. That a lot of those early negative, a lot of the early negative research studies about stress being physically problematic were funded by the tobacco industry, who then went to sell cigarettes as a stress reducer. So if you look back on kind of like the history of stress research, a lot of those early studies that really that looked at type A personalities and type B personalities and how stress caused cardiac, like all these different things, a lot of them are being reviewed now and looked at as something that might have been a little bit fishy, from the very beginning. When you kind of embrace stress and look at it as something that is just a signal to you to act. So then that could be a very powerful antidote to stress itself.
Sure.
I'll also say that sometimes recognizing that you can't act, accepting reality, is a way to deal with stress. To recognize that sometimes things aren't in our control, and to just live the moment. If you want to talk about rules of thumb to keep in your pocket, right? One of the things that I like to say is pretend the line is busy, right? And where does that come from? It comes from parents that I've spoken to who have said, I really need to talk to the insurance. You got to get through the insurance company. I got to get this, this device for my child, or this medication for myself. I got to get it taken care of. That's the first thing in the morning. I can't start my day without it. I got to do this. And there's nothing else I can do beforehand. This is the most important thing. And they get up and they do it. And they call the line. And perhaps this is dating myself because we don't normally get busy signals anymore. But you call up and the line is busy. It's busy, right? So what do? You hang up. You get a cup of coffee, right? You talk 10 minutes, or you call up and it says, wait time is 20 minutes. And what do? You wait for 20 minutes, right? Well, when you think about that, what does that mean in reality? In reality, it meant that the world continued. Life went on, right? You had to take care of it first thing in the morning and something happened and you can't do it, right? The line is busy. So you know what? You can sometimes say, before you even make the phone call, you could say, I'm going to get up in the morning. I got to take care of this. I'm going to make a call. The line's going to be busy. So that gives me 10 minutes to have a cup of coffee. That gives me 10 minutes to catch my breath. Just assume the line's going to be busy. Don't even make the call yet. But give yourself that 10 minutes. I see the same thing with grocery shopping, right? Sometimes, you got a mother is doing chores or a father is doing chores. Didn't mean to be gender traditional there. But yes, people are going, I bake the challah in my house, just saying. Okay, so you got to do the grocery. You have 15 things on your list, right? And it's a crazy stressful day because you got to get everything taken care of before you get home. And one of them is grocery shopping. So you go grocery shopping, and if you look at that list, the reality is sometimes grocery shopping takes 20 minutes. Sometimes it takes 40 minutes, right? Sometimes it takes 10, sometimes it takes an hour. And it depends on a million things out of our control, right? Whether they have the stuff on the shelf, whether there's a long line, how many cashiers are open, a million things could go on. And somehow, on the list, it always takes the same amount of space. Grocery shopping. So sometimes, right, I'll go grocery shopping and I'll say, right, Glicksman family secret, go grocery shopping and I'll say, okay, you know what, this only took me 15 minutes. If it took me 30 minutes, I'd be spending another 15 minutes doing it before I have to run to the next thing. So I'll take that 15 minutes. I don't need to, but if I did need to, I would. So and life would go on. So apparently I have 15 minutes to just kind of hang out, right? Go to the magazine section, right? Look at the funny cards, right? Go snip a pineapple and pretend I'm in Hawaii, right? Apparently I can hang out in the grocery store for 15 minutes. and life will continue. Because if that's how long it took, right? If the line was longer, it would have taken me 15 minutes extra. So I'll take that 15 minutes, even though it's a short line, just for me.
Sure. We got a question from Abigail Ditis. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. But she wants to know, how do you turn bad stress into good stress to positively affect your daily life? And I think what she's referring to is, the last, decade or so, there's been some good studies that have come out that have shown that a certain amount of stress really could improve your immunity. It could help your memory work better. It could actually help you do better in specific scenarios. It definitely leads to motivation. People that aren't stressed at all don't perform well. They don't have the motivation to work hard to get to where they need to go. And even some research, I'm looking at a 2006 study from Johns Hopkins that says that when they find that kids are more stressed, they actually accelerate their development quicker with, greater motor function and cognitive skills. So we do see that there is some level of good stress. So Abigail would like to know, we all experience stress. How can we take that stress and use it in a positive way, as opposed to letting it cause all these negative health effects and make us do more poorly in stressful situations?
Yeah, so I'll say that the first way to do that is to kind of lose the term good stress versus bad stress, because emotions in general, emotions aren't good or bad. Emotions just are, right? They just are. So when you think about, when you understand stress, right, based on, our definitions and what we've said, when you understand stress and say, stress, it's not good. Stress is not bad. Stress is just a message that's telling my body, a message that's telling me that I need to act. That's what stress is. So when you think about why, then, why stress might help people achieve more, why stress might lead to motivation, or why stress might lead to better development or better health outcome. So then you can sort of logically come to the conclusion that it's because it's getting people to act. It's getting people to act in healthy ways, right? If students who are stressed study for the exam. Students who aren't stressed don't study for the exam, right? People who are worried about their health, might be more pushed to exercise. People who aren't worried about their health, might exercise less or eat less healthfully, right? Our ancestors who had stress ran away from the bears and passed on that stress gene to their descendants. Our ancestors who didn't feel stress were eaten by bears, and they didn't pass on their genes to the next generation. So when you talk about how to make, how to sort of turn unhealthy stress into healthy stress, right, is to look and say, okay, if I focus just on the stress, if I look at stress as kind of the end of this process, so then, yeah, it's going to eat at me. When I look at stress as a message to act, so then the question doesn't become, how do I deal with my stress? The question becomes, what do I do? How do I act? Right? Not about the stress, but about whatever's causing this. So whatever situation is requiring me to act. And I know it's requiring me to act because I'm experiencing the stress response, right? That's the signal. Another way of answering this is to look back to Viktor Frankl, right? Man's Search for Meaning, who didn't really talk about stress per se, but who definitely lived through stressful situations. And what he found was that, his famous approach, his famous way of looking at things, his famous discovery was that the human being can really withstand a lot of pain, right? The human body can really withstand a tremendous amount of pain. What human beings can't really survive is suffering. And when you ask, right, when Viktor Frankl was asked, what's the difference between pain and suffering? His response was that, and I paraphrase, suffering is pain without purpose. Suffering is pain without meaning. So too stress, right? If you look at stress as just a negative feeling that you're having, so then that's unhealthy, and that could eat at you, and that could cause, different, physiological or medical responses that you don't really want. But when you look at stress as a message that I'm supposed to act, I'm supposed to do something here, so that's when it becomes healthy. And if you find yourself feeling stressed and looking around and saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, I don't know how this is, I don't know, like there's nothing around me that I see, that should be causing me this. So maybe it's just the inactivity itself. Maybe you need to get up. Maybe you need to walk around. Maybe you need to respond to those manifestations that you're feeling, right? Maybe you need to exercise. Like maybe you need to get your body kind of back in balance to get everything back to homeostasis and a calmness. And if you find yourself stressed because you're in a situation that you find you actually can't do anything about, right? There really are, we do find ourselves in situations that aren't in our control and that cause us stress. But when you recognize that the purpose of stress is to act, and if you find yourself in a situation that you really, truly can, sometimes just acceptance of that, is the act that stress should be pointing you towards. Sometimes just saying, this is the reality. And I do need to accept that sometimes people die, or sometimes I lose my job, or sometimes I get an unwanted diagnosis. Sometimes things happen that I don't have control over. There's a psychologist, Daniel Gottlieb. He wrote the book Letters to Sam, and he went through a very stressful situation that actually left him physically paralyzed. Not the stress didn't leave him physically paralyzed, but he was in a car accident that left him physically paralyzed. And as stressful as that was, and there's no denying, and I'm sure he wishes he didn't experience that. But in his books, he also talks about it as a somewhat liberating experience in some ways, and not, God forbid, because it's not something he recommends everybody go through. But he did point out the idea that sometimes when it was put in his face that he doesn't have control over everything, that he doesn't have to be perfect, that he doesn't have to be the best. When he realized that there were some things that were just out of his control, he found that rather liberating. And we don't need to go through the extreme experiences that he went through, but the idea that sometimes, the way to deal with things that you can't control is to recognize that you can't control them and stop trying to. What we call sometimes in psychology radical acceptance. That in itself is a way sometimes of coping with stress.
I love the quote you mentioned from Viktor Frankl. I find that extremely powerful. But I wonder, it seems to me that nowadays people are more stressed than ever. Do you think we've lost meaning in our life, or is there another explanation for it?
I think that sometimes we feel stressed because we feel, we think we're expected to be stressed. Sometimes we feel stress in our lives because we think that that if we're not always running and always moving and always looking ahead and always trying to get to the next step and always trying to reach that next goal and always trying to do that, if there's this never ending, roller coaster, this never ending, like we're gerbils, like on one of those running wheels, and we see that as our life. So then, that is part of our society, right? This sort of constant, never ending, quick edit, way of viewing things. But, like if we stop, I know people who have, 14 different jobs and they're running ragged. And I know people with 14 different jobs who are really quite calm and very happy, and I know people with 14 kids who are running ragged. I know people with 14 kids where everything is fine, right? And it's not because of the actual, situation they find themselves in. but it's because of how they view it. It's because of how they're experiencing it. And we do, like we have become, more stressed, as a society. But a lot of that is because we kind of expect it. This was really kind of like concretized for me during the Ebola outbreak. If you remember the Ebola outbreak,
Of course.
yeah, I don't know. In America, right? There was horrible Ebola outbreaks outside of America, but in America, did we have an Ebola outbreak? Like, was it a thing? Like, was it very?
In our minds, we did.
Yeah, on TV there was 24-hour Ebola coverage.
Yeah.
Right. But that's because we were literally being told we need to worry about this, and it's not that we shouldn't take it seriously, right? And you should get your flu vaccine, like it's true. But we are consumers of stress in America to some extent, and to sit back and say, yeah, I get that. If they turned on the news and said, you know what, everything's fine, everything's fine. So then, yeah, we probably wouldn't watch it. Like, we need to know what's going wrong. But at the same time, to recognize what it is. And again, so much of dealing with stress, so much of psychology in general, is being able to look at what's out there and define things. Psychologists, no psychologist ever invented anything new, right? Psychologists just describe the reality that's always been there. And they describe it in different ways, and they have different theories as to why things occur. But the stuff is always there. It's always been there. We have journals and journals about parenting, but parents have been around forever, right? We have, theories after theory about personality, but like before there were theorists of personality, there was still personality. It's just so a big part of psychology is just looking at the world and describing it, because once you put something into words, then you can take control of it. Like, once you put something into words and can describe it, once something has a name, so then we can talk about it. And until then, it's hard to grasp. So, like, I know, right? I know that there's a whole bunch of different kinds of clouds. I don't know what they are, but I know that, like, on the list, like, I remember, like, in third grade, somebody giving me a list of all the different kinds of clouds, and there's like this kind of that, and luckily I don't know what they're all called anymore. But if I look up at the sky, right? I don't remember what the list is, but if I look up at the sky now, I can't really distinguish between different kinds of clouds. Like, I can't see it. I can't comprehend different kinds of clouds. If somebody gave me the list and said, this kind of cloud looks this way, and this kind of cloud looks that way, and this kind of cloud looks up like this. So then I could probably look at the list and look at the sky and say, oh, now I see it. Yeah, like, I didn't distinguish that before. I didn't notice those nuances. Like, I literally didn't perceive the difference between the clouds. But now that you've given me a name, so yeah, now I can recognize that one's that kind and that one's that kind. So now we have a definition of stress. Prior to having a definition of stress, what did we have? We had our heart beating really fast, right? And we had ourselves getting sweaty and hot, and we had ourselves turning pale, and we had our pupils dilating. We had this feeling, and we didn't know what it was. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know what to do with it. But now that you can look and say, oh yeah, I get this. I know what this feeling is. This feeling is stress. And the reason that stress is coming out this way is because back in the day, it was important to keep me safe. And now, in my life now, I can look at this and say, all right, like, some of this stress is just stress that people are telling me I'm supposed to feel, right? Like, this politician is saying that I'm supposed to feel stressed because there's like an invasion coming on. And then this politician is saying I'm supposed to feel stressed because, like, nobody has health care. Whatever side, of the political spectrum you're on, there's somebody telling you what to be stressed about. And I can look and say, you know what? I don't know. Life might go on. Like, life is okay. Like, yeah, we need to address societal ills, but there's nothing to that. But I'm not in danger right now. I don't need to be stressed over it. And sometimes in a real stressful situation, when I do need to act, the stress is telling me just that I need to act. And if that's the message that you're getting from the stress, if you can label it and put a name on it, these feelings that we're having, and then take it and say, I get this, I understand what it is. Now let's act, right? And if I say, but it's too stressful, then I can say, you know what, tomorrow, right? At some point, tomorrow's going to be yesterday. Yesterday was also once a tomorrow. I made it through. I did it. I've been stressed before. I've been through really challenging situations, and I've survived. So now that I know I can do that, let's get through this one. And other times, right? I might just say, all right, I recognize this and I know what it is. And now I can put it into a little box and I can say, all right, there's some things I can't control. And I know, yes, my body is saying act, but I can tell my body back, this one is too big. This one I can't do. They say feelings are just feelings and thoughts are just thoughts. They're not orders. They're not directives. You don't have to listen to them. And stress is also that. Stress is a feeling. Feelings are just feelings. Thoughts are just thoughts. Stress is telling you to act. And if you can, you should. And if you can't, then you can't. And that's okay too.
Dr. Glicksman, thank you so much for sharing this perspective with us. In parting, do you think you could share a couple resources with us that people might benefit from if they are feeling stressed and if they need to be reminded the principles you spoke about, or some other ways that they can relieve their stress? And can you also share how people can reach out to you if they have further questions?
Well, I'll answer the easy one first, right? So to reach out to me, you can certainly give me a call at 347-390-1315. Again, that's 347-390-1315. You can also email me at sglicksman@macords.org. That's sglicksman, S as in Stephen, GLICKSMAN, at macords, MAKORDS.org. You could follow me on Twitter, Dr. Steve Glicks, but that's up to you. So those are the best ways to reach out to me. In terms of resources, so offhand, I don't have any specific resources to share with you. I could perhaps look on my shelf and see what I could find and get back to you on that. But one very good technique is, and there's many resources on it, is mindfulness. The idea right now that I'm sure many people are familiar with, of just being able to take control of the situation, right? Take control of your mind. The idea that your mind doesn't necessarily have to order you around. You can also take control of that, and that's perhaps a whole other talk about wise mind and keeping that balance between your emotional mind and your rational mind. But the idea of any resource that you can find, just Google mindfulness. There's a lot of good books out there, a lot of good resources out there that and that in and of itself is a very good stress release, a way of dealing with stress. And the other thing I'd recommend is to keep a healthy lifestyle, because since stress is that physiological response, so then keeping healthy, eating well, making sure you get enough sleep, exercising, those are all ways that will help you in stressful situations, potentially stressful situations, even outside of, the area of health and nutrition and exercise. That's what I would recommend offhand.
Okay, that was very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us this evening.
Sure, and again, I apologize for the technical difficulties in the beginning, but again,
a good setup.
stressful situations come.
Yes.
All right. And we make it through.
We did. We all survived. It's a good lesson for all of us.
All right.
Okay.
Be well then.
Thank
you very much also for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I'd like to inform you about a couple exciting opportunities currently going on with Refuat HaNefesh. First off, we have recently launched our second annual Creative Expression Contest. This contest will go on through March, and it's for people of all ages, all the way as young as elementary school until adults, past 100. We're looking for anything that any talents you have, whether that's artistic, writing, poems, videos, PowerPoints, anything you could create that could explain your view on mental health and how we could defeat the stigma within the Jewish community and beyond, or what you have experienced with your own mental health condition or family members. Send them in to us at Refuat HaNefesh, and you can win prizes from Amazon, Target, Costco, and other large retailers. We also continue to have our support room. This is a peer-led support room for people that are looking for support from other people that may be going through similar things. And that is, whether you are an individual experiencing mental illness, whether you're a family member with mental illness, or whether you're someone in the community that's looking for help supporting people, you could ask answered in real time on the Refuat HaNefesh support room, which you can find on our website, as well as a support room on Facebook as well. We publish about twice a week blog posts, both from professionals and from individuals with mental illness. Feel free to read those articles at your leisure, as well as send in articles, and we will look at them for publishing.